Old Hollywood didn't just invent stardom. It built temples for it. Marble staircases that caught the light like cinema itself. Secret bars tucked behind mahogany panels. And fountains shaped like the dreams of a nation. Behind every golden curtain was a life larger than the screen, and sometimes lonelier too. These are the homes that turned actors into gods and Los Angeles into a legend. From Spanish Revival villas perched above Sunset Boulevard to marble palaces stretching across Beverly Hills, these mansions defined status, style, and scandal. Built when glamour meant excess and privacy meant walls high enough to hide anything, these houses still whisper the stories of the people who built Hollywood. Each gate concealed more than just celebrity. They held power struggles, creative genius, romantic tragedy, and the weight of living up to an image the world wouldn't let fade. The architecture itself became performance. Tudor Revival columns stood like camera flashes frozen in stone. Art Deco mirrors multiplied beauty until it became infinite, and gardens grew quieter than fame ever allowed. These weren't just addresses. They were kingdoms where silent film stars became royalty, where studio moguls entertained presidents, where comedians built empires on laughter, and where America's most beautiful faces retreated from the very spotlight they'd fought to claim. Some became museums. Some were demolished. But everyone left behind a blueprint of what it meant to live at the peak of Hollywood's golden age, when luxury wasn't just wealth, but a declaration that you had arrived, and the world would never forget it. Pickfair Estate married Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks, the palace that defined Hollywood royalty. At 1143, Summit Drive in Beverly Hills stood Pickfair, the Tudor Revival mansion that invented the concept of Hollywood royalty. Built in 1919 and expanded throughout the 1920s, this English country manor featured a two-story great hall with hand-carved beams, a grand staircase that seemed designed for entrances, and a mirrored ballroom where the industry's elite waltzed under chandeliers imported from Europe. Secret panels lined the walls, remnants of prohibition parties, and goose houses dotted the manicured grounds like small estates themselves. Charlie Chaplin played tennis on the lawns. Albert Einstein debated philosophy in the library. Kings and queens dined at tables set with gold-rimmed china. This wasn't just a home. It was America's unofficial White House of Hollywood, where the nation's first movie stars proved that fame could buy dignity, respect, and a seat at any table in the world. The private theater screened films before they reached the public. The gardens bloomed year-round, maintained by a staff that understood perfection wasn't optional. After Mary Pickford's death in 1979, Pickfair changed hands, and in the 1990s, it was demolished and rebuilt, a fate that felt like Hollywood itself erasing its own history. The original mansion is gone, but its legend remains. The house that taught the world what stardom looked like when it came home. Hearst Castle, William Randolph Hearst and Marion Davies. The American Versailles. Perched above the California coastline in San Simeon, Hearst Castle wasn't home. It was a monument to what American wealth could become when it stopped apologizing. Built between 1919 and 1947 by architect Julia Morgan, this Spanish Revival palace sprawled across 165 rooms and 123 acres, every inch designed to overwhelm. The Neptune pool glittered like something stolen from ancient Rome, surrounded by colonnades and marble statues. The Roman pool indoors shimmered with gold leaf tiles imported from Europe, creating an underwater cathedral of light. William Randolph Hearst and Marion Davies entertained on a scale that redefined excess. Cary Grant swam in those pools. Chaplin laughed in the private theater. Winston Churchill walked the gardens. A private zoo held exotic animals that wandered the hillsides like living set pieces. Art from European castles filled the halls, tapestries, sculptures, paintings. Because Hearst didn't just collect beauty, he conquered it. After Hearst's death, the estate became a California State Historic Monument, preserved as a museum where visitors still walk through rooms designed for gods. It stands as proof that Hollywood's golden age wasn't just about films. It was about building an American aristocracy that could rival any empire the old world ever knew. Greystone Mansion, Edward L. Doheny Jr., luxury born of oil and mystery. At 905 Loma Vista Drive in Beverly Hills, Greystone Mansion rises like a castle from a Gothic novel, all Tudor Revival stone and shadowed elegance. Built in 1928 for oil heir Edward L. Doheny Jr. at a cost of $4 million, it featured 55 rooms wrapped in marble floors, Grand staircases that curve like frozen waterfalls, a bowling alley for midnight games, and secret passages that hinted at lives lived behind closed doors. The 16-acre gardens rolled across hillsides, manicured into European perfection. But beauty couldn't protect it from tragedy. Within months of completion, scandal darkened its halls, whispers of family turmoil that the press devoured and the estate could never quite shake. The mansion became famous not just for its grandeur but for the shadow it cast, a reminder that even the wealthiest couldn't buy immunity from fate. Hollywood fell in love with that darkness. Greystone became a filming icon, appearing in There Will Be Blood, Spider-Man, and dozens of productions drawn to its haunted elegance. Today it's a public park, open for events and tours. Its beauty preserved but forever tinged with mystery. Greystone reminds us that opulence and sorrow can share the same address. And sometimes they're what make a house unforgettable. The Beverly House, William Randolph Hearst's LA estate, where power slept. While Hearst Castle dominated the coastline, the Beverly House at 1011 North Beverly Drive served as William Randolph Hearst's Los Angeles headquarters, and it looked every bit the seat of an empire. Built in 1927 by architect Gordon Kaufman, this Mediterranean and Art Deco hybrid featured 19 bedrooms, 2 projection rooms, colonnaded terraces that stretched like Roman forums, and a library vast enough to hold the ambitions of media mogul who shaped public opinion with ink and influence. John F. Kennedy honeymooned here with Jacqueline, blending political power with Hollywood fantasy in a way only this house could facilitate. Later, it became a filming location itself, appearing in The Godfather and The Bodyguard, Hollywood using Hollywood's architecture to tell its own stories. The terraces overlooked the city like a throne room, the kind of view that reminded guests they were standing at the center of something larger than themselves. The Beverly House has remained in private hands, occasionally listed for over $100 million, a price tag that reflects not just square footage but history itself. It stands as a bridge between old Hollywood's aristocracy and modern luxury, proof that some addresses never lose their power, they just change who holds the keys. Greenacre's Harold Lloyd, the comedian's castle. At 1740, Greenacres Drive in Beverly Hills, Harold Lloyd built something no one expected from the man who'd hung from clock towers and risked his life for laughs. A 44-room Italian Renaissance estate that announced silent film comedy had made him royalty. Designed by Sumner Spalding in 1928, Greenacres sprawled across 15 acres of manicured perfection, complete with a 9-hole golf course, multiple pools, and even a private film laboratory where Lloyd could tinker with his craft between parties. This wasn't indulgence. It was vindication. Lloyd had earned every marble column, every manicured hedge, every sunrise view over his private golf course. He hosted charity events on the lawns, turning his success into generosity, proving that wealth could be worn with joy rather than arrogance. The estate became a symbol of what the self-made American dream looked like when it wore a tuxedo and invited the world over for drinks. After Lloyd's death, Greenacres was subdivided, its vast grounds carved into smaller lots, but the mansion itself survives as a landmark, protected, preserved, and still magnificent. It stands as a monument to an era when comedians could become moguls, when laughter built empires, and when 15 acres in Beverly Hills wasn't excess. It was simply what greatness looked like when it settled down. Jean Harlow's Westwood home, glamour with a ghostly glow. At 512 North Palm Avenue in Westwood, Jean Harlow's Georgian and Art Deco hybrid home glowed like the platinum blonde goddess herself. All white interiors, mirrored walls that multiplied beauty into infinity, and a grand spiral staircase that seemed designed for descents in satin gowns. Built in 1930, the house captured the essence of early 30s Hollywood glamour. Clean lines, reflective surfaces, and a rose garden that added softness to all that dazzling modernity. Every room felt like a set designed for close-ups. The mirrors weren't vanity. They were architecture, turning light and movement into performance. Harlow understood that stardom didn't end when the camera stopped. It lived in the way you moved through your own home, the way visitors gasped at your taste, the way even your private spaces felt like they belonged on magazine covers. Her time there was brief. Harlow's life ended far too soon, But the home became frozen in time, a capsule in an era when glamour meant youth, beauty, and a tragic kind of perfection. Today it remains privately owned, restored with vintage attention to detail, a place where fans still gather to remember the woman who made white-on-white interiors an art form. Jean Harlow's home wasn't just beautiful. It was her, captured in marble and mirror, forever young. Charlie Chaplin's Sunset Boulevard home, the tramp's hidden luxury. At 1085 Sunset Boulevard in Los Feliz, Charlie Chaplin's Spanish colonial revival home hid its brilliance behind modest arches and courtyard walls. Much like the man himself, who played poverty on screen while building an empire behind the scenes. Built in the 1920s, the estate featured secret tunnels rumored to connect to nearby properties, private studio spaces where Chaplin could choreograph his genius away from Hollywood scrutiny, and ornate arches that framed views of the city he'd helped create. The design was deliberately understated compared to the Tudor palaces rising in Beverly Hills. Chaplin preferred intimacy to intimidation, courtyards to ballrooms, shadows to spotlights. This was where the silent era's greatest artists retreated to think, to plan, to escape the weight of being the most famous face in the world. The tunnels whispered of Prohibition-era secrecy, of creative freedom that required privacy, of a man who understood that genius needed room to breathe. After Chaplin, the property transformed, eventually becoming part of a recording studio complex, still linked to entertainment, still hosting creativity, just in different forms. The Spanish colonial bones remain, preserved and repurposed, a reminder that sometimes the most modest facades hide the deepest brilliance. Chaplin's home wasn't about showing off. It was about making space for genius to work in peace. Clark Gable's Encino Ranch, the gentleman's retreat. On Encino Avenue in the San Fernando Valley, Clark Gable found something Hollywood couldn't manufacture: quiet. His colonial revival ranch stretched across acres of working stables, gardens that bloomed without cameras watching, a pool that reflected nothing but sky, and a man-made lake where the king of Hollywood could cast a fishing line and remember what it felt like to be just a man. Built in the 1930s, the estate radiated rustic luxury, with beams, stone fireplaces, and a dignity that felt earned rather than bought. Gable shared these acres with Carole Lombard, and together they built something rare in Hollywood, a life that felt real. No grand ballrooms, no mirror halls, no pretense. Just horses, land, and the kind of peace that only distance from Sunset Boulevard could provide. The ranch became a symbol of Gable's off-screen persona, rugged, grounded, and uninterested in playing royalty when he could play cowboy instead. After Gable's death, the ranch was eventually demolished, the land redeveloped into suburban sprawl. But for those who knew it, the memory remains. The place where Hollywood's most masculine star proved that real strength meant knowing when to walk away from the spotlight and build something that mattered more than fame. Carole Lombard and William Powell's Hollywood Hills Villa, the love nest above Hollywood. High in the Whiteley Heights area, Carole Lombard and William Powell's Italian Mediterranean villa perched above Los Angeles like a secret share between two people who understood that laughter was the best luxury of all. Built in the mid-1930s, the home featured terrace gardens cascading down the hillside, wrought iron balconies perfect for morning coffee with panoramic views, and interiors filled with the kind of warmth that came from genuine joy rather than calculated elegance. This was Hollywood's social hub during its brightest years. Stars gathered on those terraces, drinks in hand, watching the city lights flicker below while Lombard's legendary wit kept the party alive. The villa wasn't about intimidation or status. It was about creating a space where friendship mattered more than box office receipts, where laughter echoed through marble halls built to hold happiness rather than envy. The villa remains privately owned, maintained in historic style by owners who understand its significance. Walking those terrace gardens today, you can almost hear the echoes of parties that define an era of romance that burned bright before tragedy, of a home that proved Hollywood's greatest luxury wasn't marble or gold. It was finding someone who made you laugh in a town built on illusion. Norma Shearer and Irving Thalberg Mansion, elegance and empire. At 707 North Beverly Drive, Norma Shearer and Irving Thalberg's Georgian colonial mansion stood as MGM's unofficial palace. The place where studio royalty entertained industry power players beneath grand columns, and beside reflecting pools that mirrored more than just architecture. Built in the early 1930s by architect Roland Coate, the home featured a sweeping staircase designed for dramatic entrances, a screening room where Thalberg could preview the films shaping American culture, and interiors that balanced warmth with the formality expected from Hollywood's most powerful couple. Shearer, MGM's First Lady, understood that every detail mattered. The reflecting pool wasn't decoration. It was a statement that their home could match any estate in history. The columns weren't just structural. They were symbolic, announcing that studio executives had become America's new aristocracy. Dinner invitations to this address meant access to the machinery of Hollywood itself, where deals were made between courses and careers were built over brandy. After Thalberg's early death, the magic faded. The mansion was eventually demolished, the site redeveloped, another piece of Golden Age Hollywood erased by time and real estate. But photographs remain, showing a home where elegance and empire merged seamlessly, where studio power wore Georgian columns and entertained like royalty. Because in 1930s Hollywood, that's exactly what they were. Howard Hughes' Beverly Hills home, the fortress of a genius. At 211 Muirfield Road in Beverly Hills, Howard Hughes transformed a 30-room Spanish Revival mansion built in 1926 into something unprecedented. A fortress where genius could hide from itself. Heavy drapery blocked the California sun, turning rooms designed for light into caves of privacy. Aircraft workshop spaces filled with blueprints and mechanical dreams occupied what should have been ballrooms. Security cameras, rare for the era, monitored grounds where paranoia and brilliance competed for dominance. This wasn't old Hollywood luxury as entertainment. This was luxury as protection, as laboratory, as prison. Hughes needed walls thick enough to muffle the world's demands, rooms vast enough to contain his ambitions, and isolation deep enough to let obsession flourish. The mansion became less a home than a physical manifestation of Hughes' mind, brilliant, troubled, and increasingly disconnected from the reality beyond its gates. After his death, the property sold into private hands, stripped of its eccentric modifications, returned to conventional luxury. But Hughes' presence haunts the address still, a reminder that wealth couldn't buy peace, that mansions couldn't cure loneliness, and that sometimes Hollywood's greatest minds needed walls not to keep people out, but to keep themselves contained. Behind those Spanish Revival arches, genius and isolation met, and neither one won. Rita Hayworth's Beverly Hills villa, the Spanish dream. Nestled in Benedict Canyon, Rita Hayworth's Spanish colonial revival villa was everything the screen goddess represented. Romantic, elegant, and impossibly beautiful. Built in the late 1930s, the home featured a curved staircase that seemed designed for Hayworth's legendary grace. Hand-painted tiles imported from Spain that turned hallways into galleries. Lush gardens where bougainvillea climbed walls like nature's applause, and ornate ironwork that cast shadows like lace across sun-drenched courtyards. Unlike some of Hollywood's colder palaces, Hayworth's home radiated warmth. This was where beauty lived when it wasn't performing, where elegance felt natural rather than calculated. The Spanish colonial style suited her perfectly. Old-world sophistication, mixed with California sunshine, romance built into architecture. Visitors spoke of the serenity they felt within those walls, as if Hayworth had somehow captured on-screen magic and poured it into plaster and tile. The villa has changed hands several times over the decades, but retains its vintage elements, protected by owners who recognize they're stewarding more than real estate. They're preserving a piece of Hollywood's most romantic era. Rita Hayworth's home wasn't about power or status. It was about creating beauty that could exist away from cameras, proving that sometimes the greatest performances happen in private, in homes designed for grace. Errol Flynn's Mulholland Estate, where the wild nights never ended. At 3100 Mulholland Drive, Errol Flynn built a modernist Spanish mix that perfectly captured his swashbuckling spirit. A hilltop estate featuring a pool that seemed to spill into the city below, a private gym and boxing ring where Hollywood's most athletic stars stayed in fighting shape, a bar stocked for parties that became legendary, and views that stretched from downtown to the ocean. All of it designed for a man who believed life should be lived at maximum velocity. Flynn's gatherings became Hollywood folklore. The pool parties, the late nights, the sense that anything could happen within those walls because normal rules didn't apply to pirates, even ones who only played them on screen. The estate wasn't refined or restrained. It was an adventure in architecture, a physical manifestation of Flynn's philosophy that excess wasn't sin, it was the whole point. The original estate was demolished decades ago, but its legend persists in Hollywood lore. Old-timers still tell stories about nights at Flynn's place, about swimming pools at dawn and champagne at noon, about a house that refused to apologize for wanting too much of everything. Flynn's Mulholland estate proved that sometimes luxury means freedom. Freedom to push boundaries, freedom to live loudly, freedom to turn a home into one long, glorious party that Hollywood still talks about. And Mae West Ravenswood apartment, the queen in her tower. At 570 North Rossmore Avenue in Hollywood, Mae West proved you didn't need a sprawling estate to live like royalty. You just needed absolute control over every gilded inch of your domain. The Art Deco Ravenswood building, designed by Max Malletz in 1930, became West's kingdom when she purchased the top floors and transformed them into something between a penthouse and a fantasy. Gold leaf walls that caught light like treasure, mirrored ceilings that multiplied glamour into infinity, leopard print furniture that announced she'd never apologize for her taste, and custom lighting designed to flatter from every angle. West understood something other stars missed. Real power meant ownership. She didn't just live in the Ravenswood. She owned it, literally, making her both star and landlord, goddess, and businesswoman. Her apartment became famous not for size, but for personality. Every surface reflecting her wit, her confidence, her absolute refusal to conform to anyone else's definition of good taste. The Ravenswood still stands, its apartments preserved, West's legacy written into Art Deco architecture, and leopard print that never went out of style because it never cared about style in the first place. Mae West's home proved that luxury isn't measured in acres. It's measured in the courage to live exactly as you please. Consequences and critics be damned. Joan Crawford's Brentwood mansion, discipline and diamonds. At 426 North Bristol Avenue in Brentwood, Joan Crawford's Georgian colonial mansion was Hollywood perfection made physical. Black and white marble floors polished to mirror finish, mirror hallways that multiplied elegance into infinity, a dramatic staircase designed for entrances worthy of her legend, and manicured lawns maintained with the same fierce precision Crawford applied to every aspect of her life. Built in 1928 and featured in countless magazines, the home became a model of what Hollywood perfection looked like when it came with rules, standards, and expectations that never relaxed. Every surface gleamed. Every angle was calculated. Crawford's mansion wasn't about comfort. It was about control, about proving that a working-class girl could master elegance so thoroughly that even the rich couldn't find fault. The Art Deco interiors balanced warmth with formality, softness with structure, creating spaces that impressed visitors while reminding them they were guests in someone else's carefully constructed kingdom. The mansion has been renovated and remains privately owned, its bones still impressive even as decades separate it from Crawford's reign. Walking through those mirrored hallways today, you can feel the discipline it took to maintain such perfection, the determination required to live up to an image that demanded flawlessness. Joan Crawford's Brentwood mansion was her masterpiece, a home that proved she'd arrived, succeeded, and conquered, and no one could ever take that away. These houses weren't just homes. They were kingdoms. Every tile, pool, and gate was built for permanence in an industry built on illusion. The Tudor Revival columns that witnessed Charlie Chaplin's genius, the Art Deco mirrors that multiplied Jean Harlow's beauty, the Spanish Revival courtyards where Rita Hayworth found peace, all of it was architecture in service of something larger than shelter. These were declarations carved in marble and mahogany. We have arrived. We have succeeded. And history will remember us. Time has faded the parties and the stars. The laughter from Carol Lombard's terrace gardens has quieted. The power lunches at Norma Shearer's reflecting pool are memories now. Some mansions were demolished, their grandeur erased by real estate developers who saw only property values where once there stood legends. Others became museums, their rooms roped off, their luxury preserved behind velvet and glass. A few remain private, lived in by people who understand they're not just homeowners but stewards of Hollywood history. But the architecture remains, old Hollywood's last witnesses. These estates remind us that even legends needed somewhere to dream, to hide, to be human between takes. They prove that glamour, like marble, can crack under pressure but never truly disappear. Behind the Spanish colonial arches and Georgian columns, behind the mirror halls and terrace gardens, the golden age still glimmers. The ghosts of Hollywood royalty still walk those staircases, still swim in those pools, still stand at windows overlooking a city they helped build. Behind those gates, elegance waits, patient, timeless, ready for the lights to come back on.